On Friday, the 9th of February 1945, a force of 31 Bristol Beaufighters, escorted by 10 Mustangs, set out on a routine strike mission from their airfields in northeastern Scotland. Their target was the German destroyer, the Z-33, which had been spotted earlier that day near the entrance to Førdefjord, some 100 miles north of Bergen in Norway. It should have been a routine mission. Even though this was a heavily defended ship, the Beaufighter crews were battle-hardened and experienced in this type of attack. But as the Beaufighters skimmed the cold grey waves looking for the Norwegian coastline, the odds were already stacking against them, which would ultimately result in the worst strike-wing loss of the entire war. The wing leader team dug deep into the archives to discover what really happened on the original Black Friday.
Before we get into the story, we should really say a few words about our generous sponsors for this film, World of Warships. Although we're an aviation channel, there's a surprising amount of crossover with this online game, where you can captain hundreds of ships, including aircraft carriers, and take part in operations like Dunkirk and D-Day, all without getting seasick. It's free to play. You basically pick a ship, join a team, and you're out on the water trying to outsmart the enemy. You can sail anything from a small destroyer to a battleship. You can even have a go in a U-boat. The graphics are amazing, and it's constantly updated with new ships, nations, battles, and of course, visual effects. If you want to try it, we have a tracking link in the film description below that gives rewards for new and returning players. And if you're a new player, enter the invite code IMPACTFORCE when you register to get a nice starter boost, which includes 20 days of premium, the Japanese Tier 3 cruiser Tenryu, a commander, and a port slot, whatever that is. You can play solo, but it's even better with friends or grandchildren using divisions. Talking of the grandchildren, World of Warships Legends is now available on console. So forget the Barbie for Christmas, get them a console instead. You won't regret it. So thanks to World of Warships, now let's get back to Black Friday.
In early 1945, Germany was becoming more reliant on the shipping supply line down the Norwegian coast. To counter this, RAF Coastal Command transferred many of its Mosquito and Beaufighter strike squadrons to northeastern Scotland. And within weeks, these formidable aircraft, armed with rockets and cannons, had inflicted severe damage to the supply line, forcing the remaining ships to only sail under the cover of darkness. During the short daylight hours, the convoys would now hide in the many fields along the Norwegian coastline. To counter this, Coastal Command sent pairs of Mosquitoes or Beaufighters out over the fjords to hunt for these ships. These outriders were often flown by Norwegian crews who knew the terrain well. As soon as they spotted anything, they would radio the position back to base, and strikes would be launched if the target was deemed valuable enough. And so it was on the 9th of February 1945 at 10:30 in the morning. Two boat fighters of 489 Squadron sighted a Narvik-class destroyer with heavy escort at the entrance to Førdefjord. This was a rare chance to take out one of the few remaining warships of the German Navy. The crews were briefed immediately, and just 3 hours later, the experienced airmen of the Delaki Strike Wing were boarding their Beaufighters, ready for the 2-hour flight to Førdefjord. There were 31 Beaufighters in total, 11 from the EO-coded 404 Canadian Squadron, a similar number from the UB-coded 455 Australian Squadron, and 9 from the PL-coded 144 Squadron. They would be escorted by 10 Mustangs of 65 Squadron and 2 AC Rescue Warwicks, including this one, HG-170, to provide assistance along the route. The formation was led by Wing Commander Colin Milson, an experienced Australian who had fought in the Mediterranean and the Norwegian theatres and knew this type of strike very well. Leading the Canadians was the equally experienced squadron leader William Christensen in this aircraft, NE-339 EOU. At the very rear of the formation were 144 Squadron newboys Stan Butler and Bernard Nicol in this aircraft, NE-831 PLO. Although by February 1945, the invasion stripes had been removed. Stan takes up the story.
Takeoff was just before 1400. We rendezvoused with the Mustang escort and set course at low level in loose formation VIX of 3. There were rain squalls here and there, but visibility was reasonably good over the sea and everything was going according to plan.
The plan was to cross the coast at Sunnjefjord, head inland and then turn north to reach the southern shore of Førdefjord, just west of Naustdal. From there, the formation would turn left and attack the ships from the inland side, which would give the boat fighters an easy escape route out to sea and, more importantly, a good 5 to 10 minute head start on any fighters that would be scrambled to intercept the raid. However, unbeknown to Milson, the captain of the Z-33 had moved his ships further into the fjord after being spotted, presumably anticipating that a strike would be launched against them. Their new position was now directly ahead of the approaching strike wing. The moment the strike wing has crossed the coast, 12 Focke Wulf 190s of 9 and 12 Staffel JT5 had been scrambled from their airfield at Hurdle, some 70 miles south of Førdefjord. They were led by 70 Victory 8 Rudi Linds and the equally experienced Rudolf Artner, who had 17 victories marked on his rudder. It would take them about 15 minutes to get to the ships. The strike ring would be there in just 10. The Beaufighter crews therefore had just 5 minutes to carry out their attack and get out to sea before the enemy fighters arrived. As Førdefjord came into view, Milson looked to the left to try to spot the ships. To his dismay, they weren't there, and when a heavy flak barrage hit the formation, he realized that the ships were now directly underneath them. The Z-33 was tight against the steep cliff face, and the flak ships were in the center of the fjord. A direct attack was impossible. Milson swung the formation around to the east of the ships and assessed the situation. The Z-33 couldn't be attacked from the east due to the large cliff face behind it. The only option was to come in from the southwest and escape inland. The strike wing flew west along the south of the fjord as the leader briefed his men on the new angle of attack. The fighters were now less than a minute away. The strike wing turned 180 degrees and commenced its attack. But it was too late. The 12 Focke Wulf 190s dived out of the low cloud base directly above them. The 5-minute safety margin had been lost. What followed next was one of the largest air battles to take place over Norway during World War II. Rockets and cannon shells rained down on the ships as the boat fighters swept in from the west and southwest. This photo, taken by an Australian boat fighter during the attack, shows the Z-33 and one of her tugs under fire. The Germans had broken the ice with gunfire earlier in the day to allow the ships to get close to the shore. The ships put up a heavy flat barrage which undoubtedly hit many of the Beaufighters. Within the space of 10 minutes, the Focke Wulf 190 pilots claimed 8 Beaufighters and 1 Mustang. The Mustang pilots in turn claimed 2 Focke Wulf 190s with a further 2 damaged. Worst hit was 404 Squadron, which lost 6 Beaufighters, with 11 men killed and 1 man becoming a prisoner of war. 455 Squadron lost 2 aircraft with 2 men killed and 2 prisoners of war. 144 Squadron escaped lightly with just 1 Beaufighter lost. The crew survived the false landing and became prisoners of war. 65 Squadron actually underclaimed their victories as 4 Focke Wulf 190s were shot down that day. The squadron's only loss was Cecil Caesar, who had a prolonged dogfight with Heinz Orlowski of 9 JG5. In the end, both aircraft crashed. Caesar was killed, but the German pilot Orlowski managed to bail out at the last moment and survived after falling into a snowdrift. The 4 German losses included that of the leading ace Rudi Linds, who was killed on impact after being shot down by a Mustang north of Naustdal. Stan Butler and Bernard Nickel had been the last Beaufighter to attack, and having been hit by flak, they were chased out of the fjord by a Focke Wulf 190. But luck was with them none that day, and they escaped through the cloud and set course for home. Their Beaufighter's hydraulics had been hit, so they were forced to make a no-flap belly landing. Stan clearly remembered pressing the brake pedals hard despite having no wheels, as the aircraft dug a big furrow on the ground back at Dalachi. Nick dives out of the dorsal gun position but forgot to unplug his helmet's radio lead, leaving him with a very sore neck for weeks afterwards. Any 831 was a write-off. A bullet was found in a petrol tank and a large shell had hit the Beaufighter's nose just inches below Stan's feet. As Stan posed for this photo next to a 2-foot hole in his starboard elevator, both he and Nick realized that they had been just inches away from becoming the 10th Beaufighter crew to be lost on Black Friday.
In 1995, I was commissioned to paint Black Friday for a new museum that was being opened on the island of Herdla, which is where the German fighters were based. To open the museum, the Norwegians had invited Stan and Nick, and they'd also invited Heinz Orlowski to represent the other side. On the opening night, we were all a little concerned about how these former enemies would get on, especially as they didn't speak each other's languages at all. I have to say, it turned out to be one of the most enjoyable nights of my life. Heinz, Stan and Nick became instant best friends, as encapsulated by this photo. Heinz in the centre telling Stan at the back and Nick in the foreground, in fluent German, exactly what happened that day using the sign language used by every pilot since the dawn of aviation. So this film is dedicated to them and all the young men who took part in Black Friday from both sides.